Okay, let's start. So I'm going to stand up. I've got this kind of up and down tripod. It's just been like, look, a lot of you, I'm sure you're stuck in front of computers a lot. So what we're going to try and do is over the next 10 weeks, try and make a direct link between the whole state of the brain, the mind, the body, the science, and the experience of being ourselves. And with the important understanding that actually how we're feeling every day, our productivity, our motivation, our learning is partly our responsibility. There's something we can do every day. I'll give you a really good example. Think about moaning. Think about your own moaning. Think about when you're moaning about something. You know, we all moan about stuff. And actually, the brain science of moaning is really interesting. You know, what is moaning about? Effectively, moaning is the brain spotting a problem that ultimately needs to be solved. But in the process of moaning, a whole bunch of brain circuits get involved, not simply the ones that have spotted the problem, but the ones that really don't want to have anything to do with the problem, and the ones that are remembering last time you had something similar. And you get this outpouring of moaning that comes pouring out of your mouth. And perhaps 10–15% of that is useful because it's spotted the problem. The rest of it is a bunch of kind of complexity and difficulty, and not necessarily something that's useful. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully the sound is working. I'm going to crack on. So welcome. If you don't know who I am, I'm Andrew, brain nerd, basically. But I've spent 28 years in schools, worked with lots of young people, lots of teachers, and actually businesses as well now, trying to help everyone get the most out of their brain. So we're going to take neuroscience, we're going to take psychology, and we're going to take our day-to-day experience and smash them together to see how we can change our brains every day. Do follow us on social media. We love to interact. We always make videos every Sunday and drop them on Sunday night, usually in response to a question we've been asked in a webinar like this. Okay, so I want you to sort of hold your skepticism and try and see yourselves, everyone listening to this. I want you to learn about yourself in a new way. So children, students, adults, all of us, we don't see the world as the world is. We see it as the brain interprets the world. A very simple example. We have got rods and cones in our eyes, which enable us to see color. Some animals, for example, dogs and cats, don't have any cones. They don't see color. We see the world as our brain is, and our brain's got a lot of biases built into it, a lot of ways of seeing the world that aren't necessarily as the world is. So we need to kind of understand ourselves. We're going to use the brain to understand itself, and that is a little bit tricky. So we can spend our whole life being a brain bot, following the brain's little programs, or we've got this amazing power to begin to understand the brain and then change our response, because we're not living in something that doesn't change. Our brain changes throughout our lives on the basis of what we use it for. And that's what being a neuro ninja is all about. Understanding that you're living in a brain, that you have the power to change, and that you can achieve anything you want ultimately, as long as you're willing to go through the pain of practicing that thing, whatever that thing is. You know, it ideally would be something that you kind of feel is worthwhile and that you want to push yourself towards. So we need to wake up, all of us wake up in our brains, understand how our brain works, and respond flexibly to what is happening inside and out. And just hang on in there, because it is a little bit weird when we start looking at the brain. Our mission really as a company is to help everyone make each day a masterpiece. If we could do every day the habits, the routines that our brain needed, if we could approach every problem in a way that supported the way our brain works, we would get so much more out of every single day. Remember, our brain has got biases, so it will always focus on the negatives, because it's trying to spot the problems so it can solve them. So you can have a fantastic day, and if one thing happens that's not great, you're going to probably focus on that one thing, because that's the way the brain operates. If you've got a question, bung it in the chat, because I won't pause, because you know it's half an hour, and I'll answer any questions. So we get to live 30,000 days on planet Earth. That's if we get to live 82 years, which is the average life expectancy of men and women. We get 30,000 days and we want every single one of them to be a masterpiece. And we've got the capacity to do that. We can understand our brain, but we are not what we think we are. We think we're a mind driving around a body and a brain, but that's not exactly what's happening. It's a little bit different to that. We need to have a kind of another look using the science and what science tells us what we are. We are a body and a brain which produce a mind. And we're going to talk about that a lot tonight, because the title of tonight is about having a better day every day. So how can we have a better day every day? And let's be honest, the reason we put these together, it's really hard at the moment. Everyone is struggling. Lots of young people I speak to are suffering from extreme levels of meh, that demotivation, can't really be bothered. And obviously there's all the worry and there's the stress and it's dark and it's wet and it's a difficult time of year. That's why we're putting these on. It's full of hope. It's full of possibility. And we can start. We don't have to wait. We live in brains that love habits. They love habits. The reason they love habits is because habits are much less requiring of energy. You can use your pre-existing neural pathways, your little tracks, the little structures in your head, and the brain hasn't got to make any effort. And our brains are a bit lazy. So we can end up, particularly in times like this, just piling through days that feel very routine, following our habits and not really being aware. We can end up stuck on the escalator of our lives, a bit like the people in this video. Hopefully the technology doesn't let us down.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
So that could be all of us stuck in our brains, just following its programs and kind of getting stuck, thinking the same thoughts and going around and around. But we've got the opportunity and the responsibility to change our situation every day. And it's tiny changes, tiny changes that add up over time. So change that is incremental, little by little, iterative, improving, and involved. We need to focus and be aware of it. So where is the gap in all of our lives? Where is it? Where is the gap? It's in what we do every day, because what we do every day changes the nature of our brain, and the brain changes the nature of our mind. So we can improve. If you just think about something incredible, you're a young person listening to this, think about that journey you've gone on from early years where you didn't know what those squiggles on a page were, to now in year 6 being able to read full chapter books. That amazing transformation of being able to take those little squiggles on a page and now read them fluently and not even think about it actually, and just enjoy the story. Your brain can do incredible things. That thing that you've done, learning to read over the course of 5 years, it took our species 3,000 years to invent writing and alphabets. So we're asking our brains to do something in 5 years that it took the whole human race 2,000 or 3,000 years. So we can change our brains by unleashing daily habits to do that. And together we can step into a new way of seeing ourselves. So we've got everything we need up here. We don't need anything else. We just need to work with it. And everyone's brain is a little bit different. Some brains are a bit more sensitive. Some brains love risk. Some brains hate risk. Some brains find words easier. Some brains are more creative. Some brains love maths. Resilient brains are built not made. We build them through our responses every day, and our brains change because they're live wired. They're waiting to see what we use them for. And whatever we use them for, they reinforce those things. We get better and better at what we practice. So we are ultimately a sum total of what we've done and what we do. So we can change our brains by deciding to act. And that means we can unleash a different way of being. So let's kind of get straight on with it. So what we want you to do is learn about your brain and then unleash that love of your life. So how can we have a better day every single day? Well, first of all, we need to know who we are and what we are. And we're going to look at the neuroscience of that. So let's look at what we are and look at a bit of biology. So as you go through this, you'll think, why did nobody tell me this before? We are our brain and our body, and our brain and body build our minds. We've got two halves to our nervous system, and they determine everything about our mood, our motivation, our activity, our engagement, our attention every single day. And we need to start realizing where we are in our nervous system and the trick that we can move ourselves from one space to another. So if we're in a bad mood, we don't have to be in that bad mood every day. We can do some stuff that will change the chemistry of our brain through activities. So physical and mental health are not separate from each other. They are completely intertwined. And just like we're not separate from each other, we're connected to our environment, the people around us, the school, all of that stuff affects our physical and mental health, but they are the same thing. The brain is the thing that builds the mind every day. So two halves of our nervous system. We've got the react system, which is the bit that gets us ready for action. So that's the bit that's activated. We're doing a maths test. We've got a rugby match. We're running away from a bear. Not that that happens much in the UK, but when we're really scared, fight, flight, freeze, that react system, the sympathetic nervous system, when that comes on, the brain that we're living inside, the mind changes as a result of the brain's responses. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a while. The other half of the nervous system is the response system. That's the one that calms us down. That's the one that comes on when we're digesting our food, when we're going to sleep, when we're having a nice bath, when we're having a good conversation with a friend, and we feel much more calm and we can cope and we can manage. When we feel overwhelmed, we're in our react system, and we have a big problem because there's so much change in the world that upsets our brain. So in order to feel kind of fine, we need to be in a balanced nervous system. 30% react, up and at 'em, and moving back and forth to the parasympathetic nervous system. 70% respond, the calm half of the nervous system. Now we have a problem nowadays, which I'm going to get onto in a second. So we've got these two halves of the nervous system, and this lady's just going to explain those two halves briefly.
Our nervous system has two parts, an alerting, activating, stressed out part, and a calming, relaxing, restoring part. Today we're going to learn about activating the second part. When we feel unsafe, our nervous system has a way of getting activated to respond to threats. This is called the sympathetic nervous system. This leads to the physiological reaction that is the fight, flight, freeze response, and it gets our heart pounding and our muscles ready for a big fight. The body also has a system to calm down and restore peace after a stressful incident. This is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And I remember this because a para is like a parachute. It calms us down and slows down this reaction. Now, the part of our nervous system that we use the most becomes the strongest. So it's very important that we intentionally train our bodies and minds to have a more dominant parasympathetic response.
So that parasympathetic response she's talking about is the respond nervous system. So the react system comes on whenever we've got to perform, when we've got to deliver a test result, rugby match, any kind of moment of performance, and any uncertainty. So that email from that homework deadline, that what's going to happen next week about lockdown, all of that stuff, have I got COVID, all of those things, that level of uncertainty, that triggers the react system. And the problem in the 21st century, the problem living in a pandemic, the problem stuck at home remote learning, is the level of uncertainty, the incoming is just constant, and we can constantly find ourselves stuck in that react system, and we can end up wedged in that react system, and that can create a problem because the react system makes our heart pump faster, increases our alertness, stops digestion and repair, narrows our thinking, makes our breathing shallower and quicker. All of those things happen in response to the react system, and that's fine in a healthy environment, nervous system. But if you've got all this information coming in and you're not taking the moment to kind of look after your well-being, you can find yourself frazzled. Lots of people are reporting a kind of emotional exhaustion right now, and that's because what the react system does is it narrows our awareness. It reduces our ability to think through problems, because upsettingly, when we're in our react system, the thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex behind our forehead, actually powers down. The blood flow there reduces. Why is that? That seems a little bit cruel. You know, when we're a bit stressed about how complex things are, that bit of our brain powers down. Why is that? Because actually, that bit of our brain powering down, when we were running away from a predator on the African savannah, we didn't need to be thinking about it. And that's where it comes from originally. So react gets us ready for stuff, and it's fine for a bit of the day, but we can end up stuck there. And the 21st century, with all its incoming all of the time, is such an intense environment. And we're seeing an upswing in anxiety across the piece before the pandemic, but even more now. And one of the reasons for that is the level of uncertainty has gone up enormously. And brains that don't know what's going to happen next can get stressed quite quickly because we can't work through the problem. We're churning and churning and churning, and we can't come up with the answer. So why is this 30-70 balance between the respond and react system so important? Because it's like it was in the Stone Age. In the Stone Age, it was pretty boring. No Netflix, no electric lights. And then it was terrifying as a lion chased us or the tribe over the hill attacked us. And then it was boring, boring, boring. And then terrifying, boring, boring. And that balance is where our nervous system is designed to sit. So we need to hit that balance. But we don't want to ditch our iPhones and go and live on the African savannah. We need to cope in a different way in the modern world. We need to respond to these things. Volatility, I don't know what's going to happen next. Uncertainty, really? Complexity, that is really hard to work out. Ambiguity, not really sure about that. All of those things set off the react system in our brain automatically. We can't do anything about that, but we can notice it and do something in response. Now, that response constantly to all that incoming turns on the emotional circuits, gets us stressed out, and we'll look at what actually happens in a second. So the response system is the opposite. You know, you're in a bath, that is the response system. You're having a good conversation with a friend, that's the response system. You're doing mindfulness, that's the response system. Your heart rate slows, you calm down, your blood pressure reduces, your capillaries open, you calm down, your body starts repairing itself. So the brain builds the mind. We're going to look at that in a second. But basically, when your nervous system is engaged in the sympathetic nervous system, you're active and engaged, but you can skid quite quickly into anxiety and worry. And with all the uncertainty that's coming at us, we can end up stuck in that red area of our nervous system for much, much longer. And that becomes exhausting. We'll see why in a second. We naturally move back and forth between them. And have a think about you in relation to this week. Have a think about your kids in relation to this week. Where have you been this week in your nervous system? Where do you want to be? And how do you get there? How do we move ourselves back away from those kind of stressful moments? Well, our brains are kind of neurally plastic. They change all of the time. And that's fantastic, but it does create a problem. So we're going to look at what happens if we get stuck in that stress system, that sympathetic nervous system, that react system. What happens or what can happen to our brain?
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked, or having arguments at home can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease.
So that's all very depressing. The most important thing to remember is we're living in this brain that changes on the basis of what we use it for. So we need to live in a balanced nervous system in order to have the best day every day. And we need to use our awareness to work out where we are in our heads. So let's just look at that and talk about that for a second. So you will have heard me, possibly some of you, talk about this before, but these 12 rocks of well-being are the daily habits that our brain needs us to carry out in order to create that balanced nervous system. So 9 of these habits turn on the response nervous system. A quick walk outside, if you're stressed, will turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. Walking in nature turns on your response nervous system. Having a good conversation with a friend, working through a problem, that turns on the parasympathetic nervous system. Gratitude and kindness do the same, turns on circuits in your prefrontal cortex. Learning, playing, creating, reading, all of those things do the same thing. Sleep, mindfulness, mind wandering, managing emotions. These are the ways that we should respond to the complex and tricky 21st century. We do these things every day, and we're putting ourselves back towards the green, back towards the green, back towards the green. We can't stop the way the world's going to get complex. I mean, Trump left yesterday, so it may get a little less stressy because we won't have to worry with kind of dodgy tweets and things. We can start building a calm down toolbox, a mental construct where we put a bunch of ideas that help us calm down. So a portable calm down toolbox that we can take anywhere. Music that calms us down. Walking outside calms us down. Deep breathing exercises, breathing exercises. There's loads of, if you just type breathing exercises into YouTube, there's loads of stuff. And there's some fantastic breathing exercises for kids, which involve animations, and it's good fun. Breathing exercises, visualizing a favorite place, carrying a photo of a good memory, having something soft on your keyring. I'm sorry, my dogs are getting a bit stressed. They must be in their sympathetic nervous system. Carry a picture of your pet. Develop supportive maxims. For example, if you're suffering from an anxiety attack, this phrase, the symptoms of an anxiety attack are uncomfortable but not dangerous, is quite a good phrase to use live in the midst of an anxiety attack. I realize there's a lot else happening, but that anxiety attack is a massive it's nervous system response. It's a fight, flight, freeze response. And as we saw, our brain's got itself kind of stuck in a place. So the other thing to do to make sure that we have a great day every day is to make a plan. Now, this is where we're going to talk a bit more about this next week, and this leads into next week's session. So we need to know where we are in our heads. We need to know whether we've been triggered into our sympathetic nervous system, and the ways that we can know that. If we're in our sympathetic nervous system, our thoughts are whirling about and they're very emotionally charged, and our mouth might be a bit dry, and we might feel like we want to kind of clench our fists, and our jaw might be grinding. That's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, the mouth is wet. There are parasympathetic nerve endings in our mouth generating saliva. We're kind of breathing more deeply. We're kind of thinking things through. We're feeling a bit chilled, that kind of feeling. So knowing where we are and applying our awareness to that. The other thing we need to make sure we do every day, if we don't make a plan, our brain will do the lazy thing. It will follow those habits. It will get itself stuck on that escalator. So and this is all of us, if we don't make a plan, our brain will choose passive and easy. It will just use pre-existing pathways. It will just do what it's always done, because making a plan means that you're going to maybe learn some stuff. You're going to do something different, and that's going to require effort and energy from the brain. It's going to need to make new connections. And one of the brain's missions is to try and conserve energy the whole time. So that's where we're going to start next week. We're going to look at how we can manage our daily motivation and productivity. But we need to get ourselves in that balanced nervous system first. So that's step one. Our mission for all of you is to help you be the best for the world every single day. So we always try and end on an inspiring video.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me, though, was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." And so I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "Now, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." And from that moment on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
I love that video. So the best for the world is about understanding that the brain builds the mind every day. The mind is the brain's way of talking to itself about what it's doing. So whatever our brain's doing appears in the mind milliseconds afterwards. That moment when you wake up in the morning, that groggy experience that lasts 20 minutes to 50 minutes called sleep inertia is the brain building that day's mind. Every day's mind is a little bit different, and minds shift in a finger click as events occur in the world, and we move from our parasympathetic to our sympathetic nervous system. And we need to catch that. We need to be aware of that and we need to push back and make sure we build our well-being in every day. So we build our calm down toolbox, we do our rocks of well-being, we make sure that we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, because we need the prefrontal cortex. We need that to cope with the stress that we come across in the 21st century. So have a think about which rocks that you're going to be working on. If you go to our website, actionyourpotential.org, you'll find that checklist. You can download the checklist, and then you can stick it on the fridge and start nagging everyone to do their rocks. And, have a think about a plan for every day. Balance work, productivity, and rest. Even if it's a 5-minute walk, even if it's a 2-minute breathing exercise, that is nudging your physiological brake pedal. That is turning on your response system. Okay, next week, we're going to be looking at this question. Why don't I get stuff done, and how to be more productive every day? And that has been my theme this week, talking to lots of students. They have felt really, really demotivated and suffering lots of procrastination. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to be working with you all again. I'll come and answer the questions now, and I'll see you all next week. The recording will be with you in a few days. Take care, everyone. Look after yourselves.